Osborne. Today we are taking a tour through Australia, focusing on one grape variety, Cabernet Sauvignon. We have three incredible guests to talk about three wines from their really fantastic wineries. If you purchase these wines ahead of time from Wine.com, fantastic. Please make sure you have them open and in some glassware. This is one of those tastings where it's really great if you're able to open all three together and taste them side by side to just kind of compare and contrast the region, the grape variety, and how that all kind of works together. I realize there are three wines, and if you're solo or even two, it's kind of hard to get through three bottles in one night, but these kinds of wines, this quality, caliber quality, definitely able to last in your fridge for a few more days. So you can kind of continue to enjoy them as they evolve. So I really encourage you to have them all open. That said, should you want to ever revisit them, this video will live on our Wine.com YouTube channel, as all our videos do in the future. Also, if you want to get more into the tasting notes for each of these wines, you can always go to the Wine.com page for all of these. We've got lots of critic reviews, winemaker notes, maps, videos, so much information if you really want to dive a little bit deeper. Australia's a really kind of complex and interesting region, and we kind of help you discover that on Wine.com. So I encourage you to visit there. The three wines that we're tasting today in order are the Fowles Farm to Table Cabernet Sauvignon, Jim Barry Cover Drive Cabernet Sauvignon, and Vasse Felix Cabernet Sauvignon. So these three wines are coming from three different regions, and just kind of a quick note on Australia, hard to do, but we're looking at this country. It's large, same size as the U.S., and but kind of like the U.S., you know, the best places for wine are these little small pockets around the country that really do well. So the ones we're focusing on here, Victoria, you know, kind of down south there, and then we're looking at South Australia does really well as well, especially around the town of Adelaide, and then further south in Coonawarra, and then all the way over on the other side, you see Margaret River, which is kind of in that Western Australia region in the south there. So I love Australia. I love Australian wines. It's one of my favorite wine producing countries. The people are nice. The wines are amazing. I even named one of my daughters Adelaide. This is a fantastic place to discover an incredible diversity of wines. People don't always think of that. You think of Shiraz, right? But this country grows Riesling, some fantastic Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Semillon, and then in the reds, you've got really fantastic Pinot Noir, Grenache, the Grenache, and of course, Cabernet Sauvignon. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Not to mention, though, the quality to price ratio coming out of Australia is fantastic. You can drink like a king and queen without breaking the bank because just the style and the quality are so distinct, diverse, and delicious. So today we're highlighting one grape that will represent that diversity and value, and that is Cabernet Sauvignon. And to discuss each of these wines, let us introduce our guests, the winemakers, they're proprietors of these places. Matt Fowles, representing Fowles Winery in Victoria. And we have Tom Barry of Jim Barry Wines, and Virginia Wilcock from Vasse Felix in Margaret River. Welcome to you all. Thank you so much for coming and your time to be here. Hello, good morning. It's morning there, right? Yes, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Well, in Europe, it's usually like 1 a.m. So we're just be thankful it's daylight hours, right? So I kind of want to dive into just talking to each of you about your region and your wine. I think we're going to start in Victoria with you, Matt. Before we kind of talk about that region and the grape there, I want to just kind of quickly touch on your history in wine, because you didn't grow up in a wine family. You were not born into a winemaking family. You switched careers to venture into this. What was the reason behind that?
Well, the reason behind that obviously was not having a winery and a vineyard. And so we had to start and get busy elsewhere, my wife and I. And for me, that despite being the kid who was always outside and playing with insects and bugs and whatnot, loving the country and so on, yeah, we had to get busy doing other things before we could get into the wine industry. So for me, that was a lawyer, and my wife was a graphic designer. But very quickly didn't enjoy that career, and had an opportunity to get up close to where mum and dad were, and in a region we knew very well.
Oh, good. So your family was already there. So you were kind of already in that Victoria area?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, mum and dad weren't farmers growing up either, but dad, like me, wanted to be a farmer, and he got his opportunity. So yeah, that region has been a place where our family's been. The Strathbogie Ranges has been a place where
Go
our
ahead.
family.
I'm sorry, say it one more time. It's
Strathbogie Range.
Strathbogie? Because I'm not familiar. This is kind of a new region for me, and I know we have it on a map that we can look at. Strathbogie for the farm to table Cabernet region. Further north of Europe, I think most people are slightly familiar with. And anyway, so that's kind of where we are, and that's where your family's from. So what led you to, I know you have a lot of different varieties growing there, and you're in a coolerish climate, which I think is kind of more known for Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, maybe some Shiraz.
That's right.
So
that's
Cabernet,
right.
what led you to that? Sorry? Go ahead.
As a general statement, Victoria is known as a cooler climate. And there's this big landmass that separates the southern regions that have maritime influence from the northern regions like ours. So it's part of a mountain range called the Great Dividing Range. And because we're north of that Great Dividing Range, we get more desert-like pattern, diurnal shift. And then we're also elevated. So we're about 500 metres above sea level. So because of the stable climate, we're able to grow a wide variety of varieties. And we grow 12 different varieties, everything from Riesling and Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot in the reds, Sangiovese, right through to Cabernet and even Mourvedre. So we have a really broad ability to grow different varieties. We have really reliable ripening late in the season. So yeah, it's a really, we're very lucky. It's a lovely place to grow grapes.
Yeah. And what do you think the connection to land and growing Cabernet is? What makes it so unique and special for growing Cabernet?
Well, I think the long hang time. So we have a very late season. And for instance, this Cabernet was harvested in the last week of April, but we'll often go into May. And Cabernet, because of its thick skin, has a great ability to hang out there. And so we find that we get that really gradual ripening. And so you get that full development of flavour, and we can still have alcohols that are in check. The farm to table alcohol is at 13.7, which is a nice spot with fully ripe flavours.
Yeah, definitely. And your label, the label. So Fowles obviously is your family name, but the farm to table, and of course my favorite, and of course I had to try the wines when I was like, ladies who shoot their lunch. I have to try that label because I would love to be a lady who shoots their lunch. Not only that, a lady who lunches or a lady who shoots their lunch. So I love that idea, but this labeling with the farm to table, the hunting theme, if you will, what was the story behind that?
Yeah, well, I wasn't born to wine, but I've always loved wine, and really since the age of 16 took a really keen interest in it, safe, keen interest. And then, but for me, it's more about a broader lifestyle. So, our push up to the farm was, partly to raise our own livestock. We grow our own vegetables, and I sustainably and ethically hunt my own meat. And so really for me, it's this whole broader way of living that is what interests me, and wine is one part of that. This beautiful baby of ours, not the human one, the piggy one, has gone on to become a much celebrated salami. And, for some people that can be quite confronting, but for me, it's, there's a responsibility on me to look after the animals and then, use them fully. And that's something that I'm really, really passionate about. Mm-hmm. And so that parlays into, why do we label our wine the way we do? Our wines, when we're blending them, we have wines that are made in, I guess, a more traditional way that honour the vineyard. But for us, the ladies who shoot their lunch in the farm to table is actually about honouring food in a sense, a style that works really well with food. And I won't go into too much detail unless you want me to, but the nature of farmed meat is very different to wild meat. Mm-hmm. And the density, the texture, the aromas. And so we look to actually have different attributes in the respective wines that work well with those meats. And you can do things differently right from the vineyard all the way through the winemaking. and labelling. And so in the case of Ladies Who Shoot Their Lunch, that's a wine that we like to match with wild game. And then Farm to Table is a wine we like to match with the fattier, softer farmed meat.
Okay, all right. I like that. Okay, well let's go ahead and taste this Cabernet, because I kind of want to talk a little bit about the style that you're aiming for, what we're kind of looking for in the flavor profile, and then and after we get through that, talk a little bit about the pairing nature of that for the farm versus the hunt, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, just guide us through this tasting as we're all tasting it at home.
Yeah, so just a reminder, we are in a relatively cool region with large diurnal shifts. So, lovely gradual ripening. So one of the features of our region, I think, is that we get a lot of really pronounced aroma, and that can be a great thing for food and wine matching. We also get great retention of acid. So an acid for me is kind of the key building block in food and wine matching. It's really the thread that highlights ingredients and refreshes your palate, and we make these wines in a style that won't overwhelm food, which sometimes wines can. So what I'm looking for in these wines is fresh, lovely fresh acid that makes your mouth water, and hopefully you see that lovely pronounced aroma. Fresh acid is great for food and wine matching. And then the other thing we want is true varietal character. Now, this has a dollop of Merlot as well, and Merlot and Cabernet are related. So it's, we don't always blend depending on the vintage, but in this 17 vintage, we wanted to flesh it out a bit, which the Merlot does. I think of Merlot as Cabernet without the pain. It's got bigger berries and less texture, so it just softens the wine a little bit, the Cabernet a little bit, which is important. But as a general comment, the farmed meat with more fat and a softer texture compared to wild meat can take more fruit weight and oak contribution from oak. So we have French and American oak, whereas with our wild wines, the Ladies Who Shoot Their Lunch, we would never use American oak as one example, because I don't see it as a style fit for that food.
There's a slight smoky character to it that I really like as well. It's really subtle, but it's something I'm take on very much. But I love that all that black fruit, and there's something I read on one of the notes that stood out to me, the dark chocolate characteristic as well, that came out when I read it.
Yeah, so then a little bit of that will be coming from the oak as well.
Yeah.
So the sort of thing we think about with farm to table Cabernet, I mean, as you've all seen from the label now, we've got the picture of the cow, and so beef is an excellent match. Anything char grilled that we can match up to that contribution as well. And the firmness of Cabernet is a lovely match for meat that has sort of any intramuscular fat or some fat hanging onto the side of it, like a steak. It's gonna quickly punch through that fattiness and leave your palate fresh and ready to go.
Yeah, great. I like that kind of aim toward the game versus the farm thing. It's interesting. A lot of people ask about food pairing, so you got that one down. Great. Well, thank you so much. This is a delicious wine, and I don't have any steak for tonight, but I wish I did. But like I said, we can keep these wines, so maybe tomorrow. So let's move on to another Cabernet region, Coonawarra. Tom, you are third generation of Jim Barry Wines, which is a legendary winery in Clare Valley. Just quickly, a generation. Did you just know you had to go with the
When I didn't get that, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was saying, as third generation, was it kind of expected for you to go into the wine business, or did you have a choice?
Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah, hi everybody.
This is Tom Barry. Woo!
Yeah, they do. Yeah, there was a bit of pressure. I sometimes joke I wasn't smart enough to do anything else, so I ended up jumping into the wine industry. So yeah, becoming a winemaker, yeah, it was something I always thought I'd do. Growing up around the winery, Grandpa Jim, he was the first qualified winemaker in Clare, and the 17th qualified in Australia. So yeah, it definitely runs in our blood. And then my dad Peter also did winemaking as well. So yeah, we do have a rich history of winemakers in the family. And we always believe, you want someone from the family sort of looking over the vines and over the wine. So yeah, it's been great. Before COVID, I couldn't complain about anything. Working for the family, making wine. Just amazing. So, and we are still very fortunate. That we're
I love all the. I love that family tradition, and especially when families all get along and pass those along to everybody. Yes, I'm sure everybody has new things to complain about with COVID, but I did want to talk a little bit about where the Cabernet is grown, because you are in Clare Valley as a winery, but it comes from Coonawarra, which is a magical place for Cabernet. Mainly because of the dirt. So I wanted to know if maybe you could kind of talk a little bit about this lovely dirt. Well, there's your family. That's your brother and father?
Yes, yeah. Dad, my brother on the left, he's got a big Ned Kelly beard. Ned Kelly was a bushranger in Australia. He figures he can sell more wine with a beard, so good luck to him.
Yeah.
And yeah, me on the right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's us. So Sam, my brother's in sales. Dad runs the show, and I'm in winemaking. So yeah, it works out pretty well.
So that means you will be able to tell us about Terra Rosa. I don't know why, but Terra Rosa and Coonawarra is one of those. I think when you're learning about wine, you have these little pieces of wine that stick, and something about Terra Rosa and Coonawarra just in Cabernet always just kind of was something that stuck easily, because it was just it was a great story and just a really cool piece of geology. And maybe you can explain why Cabernet does so well in these interesting soils.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to say the reason we are down in Coonawarra is Dad used to always swap wine with the Wynn family. So David Wynn and Adam Wynn, and Grandpa and Dad love Coonawarra. And our family philosophy is about owning our own vineyards. So, we weren't going to go down there and start purchasing fruit. So Dad and Grandpa, many trips down there looking for vineyards, and we just found an old cricket pitch, in the southwestern corner of Coonawarra. And we purchased that in '97 and then planted it. So that's sort of our story about coming to Coonawarra and start making.
And the cricket pitch.
On the cricket pitch, yeah. So the Terra Rosa, though, that I'll talk about that. So it's a 15-kilometre stretch by 2-kilometre wide. So they call it the cigar. And this Terra Rosa, it's actually a very heavy oxidized limestone that's turned to Terra Rosa. So Terra Rosa being the Italian word for red. Red. So red soil. And then, and that's all. The Terra Rosa is really good for Cabernet. And away from the Terra Rosa is a heavy sort of grey black clay. And that soil there is too heavy for any quality winemaking. The Terra Rosa, really good draining capacity. And also the limestone that sits underneath the Terra Rosa also has good water holding capacity. So this is, why it's so good for Cabernet. But then also, Coonawarra being quite close to, it's about 100 kilometres from the ocean, very similar characteristics to Bordeaux, which is why there are so many Bordeaux varieties planted down there.
Yeah, I would love to visit there. So you always see these wonderful pictures of the soil, and it would just be kind of so cool to see it, because it's so distinct, it's so colorful, so distinctive. And so the label, you talked a little bit about cricket pitch, and that cover drive is the label,
so,
correct?
Here it is. So when we purchased the cricket pitch or the oval, we actually planted vineyards around the oval, and we left the original pitch. So when I've been in America, I've always talked about the diamond in baseball. So we planted the cricket, the vines in the outfield, and then we just left the diamond there. So, you know, we've had a few games of cricket there. You know, we've done these little cricket tournaments with, you know, trade and good customers, and, you know, had plenty to drink and had a good time. And it's been, you know, it's been a lot of fun to keep it there as well. And I've had friends down there that they made hundreds off on that pitch, you know, when they were growing up. So there's a lot of history on that oval as well that we didn't want to completely destroy.
Yeah, no, it is. I love that the vineyard just kind of planted right around it. So
yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's right. It's a lot of fun, you know. So this is our entry level Coonawarra Cabernet, you know, medium bodied. What I really agree with Matt there. You know, when he was talking about acid, you know, we really want these wines to be driven by acid for longevity, but also be supported by some nice fruit weight as well.
wait, you got to start. You can start talking about that, but let's start tasting it. You gotta.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's. I would love for you to kind of taste us through it and talk a little bit about the flavor profile that comes through, and maybe what possibly kind of corresponds to what the earth, that soil, gives to this wine. And I will say also, I love all three of these wines. I had tasted them before, and one thing that stood out was the acid for all of them. And for me, that's also winning. Yeah. So that's great. So let's taste through this.
Yeah. So if you look at it on the nose, there's not a lot of oak there. So there's probably only 15% new oak in this wine. It's all French oak. And that way, you know, it's all about fruit expression as well. We don't want the oak to dominate the nose. So, you know, there's a little bit of, you know, that mintiness that you can get from Coonawarra. It's about balancing the fruit with that herbaceousness as well, you know. So we do have quite a long ripening period down in Coonawarra, so which is great. We can leave the grapes on the vines for quite a long time, which will get rid of that herbaceousness as well. And then on the palate, the tannins aren't too aggressive. So with a wine like this, where it is designed to be drunk young, we want to be careful with our tannin management. So you know, obviously, you know, going into some older oak helps that, and also ferment management as well. Not being too aggressive when we're making this wine. So yeah, subtle tannins, and then again, you know, some nice plush cassis, you know, Cabernet characters that you'd expect out of, you know, a young Coonawarra Cabernet.
Mm-hmm. And that you're right. Rather than the kind of harsher herbaceous, it's more of that eucalyptus sweet mint kind of style of herbaceous that is softer and more pleasant. It's delicious.
Because 17 was quite a cool late year as well, 2017. So we ended up picking, I think this was middle of May when we picked this. So, you know, quite late. I think we'd finished Clare, you know, about 6 weeks before this. So it always makes for a long vintage, but it's definitely rewarding when you've got this, you know, beautiful resource down in the Coonawarra to play with at the end of the Clare Valley vintage.
Yeah, and this is so pretty, and I love that, you know, you're talking about this is meant to be drunk young, and it's made in that wonderful style that's so approachable and ready to go. So we went through farm and fowl. I like that, right? Fowl. Farm and game with Matt's wine, but for this one, do you have any favorite pairings with it?
Well, I think, you know, not just with Coonawarra Cabernet, but with, you know, something like Margaret River as well. I'm guessing. I love lamb. So, you know, roast lamb, some lamb chops, you know, anything like that. Anything you'd normally have a bit of a, you know, mint on, or a bit of rosemary or something like that. I think, you know, that would go so well with that.
Yeah, I think anything with that, like rosemary, that kind of special.
So good.
I know, it's one herb I can't kill, so I'm also very excited about that. But well, thank you. I love your wines. I love, and for everybody at home too, if you haven't had some of the Rieslings from Jim Barry, I highly recommend them. And the Shiraz is another favorite. So yeah, thank you for sharing these. These are wonderful. Let's head over to the other side of the country, into the Margaret River. Vasse Felix. So this is here down near the Southern Peninsula. It's really also kind of a cooler climate. It's really always, not always, but I guess when I was learning about Margaret River, it always touted as kind of that similar to Bordeaux region there in Margaret River. So that's there on the map. And then Virginia, I know that you grew up a little bit around wine, a little bit. There's Cabernet here, and you've been making wine in the Margaret River for nearly 3 decades now. What makes Cabernet so special in the Margaret River, do you think?
Look, I think Tom and Matt have actually revealed quite a bit of that. It's definitely in more of a marginal, cooler sort of environment where you do get that longer ripening. And I know, so many different regions in the world grow Cabernet, but it's having that cooler influence where you can preserve that vibrance and incredible perfume that you get with Cabernet and be able to have that long ripening to get those tannins so beautiful. And it is a trick. And as Matt said, thick skins, there's small berries, there's a high tannin to pulp ratio. There's a lot of tannin in Cabernet. So you've got to be able to get them right. And you have to be in magical places. A lot of people think you can grow Cabernet anywhere, but you can't. Cabernet can be aggressive and mean grown in the wrong place, but grown in the right place. And, I think the three of us are in cooler parts of Australia. A lot of people think Australia is warm. It has some beautiful cool places that we can ripen those tannins to the most sublime level.
Yeah, is that so you're fairly close to the ocean here at Vasse Felix, right?
Yeah. So I think that, the reason why we talked about being almost similar to Bordeaux in the old days is because of the maritime influence. So if you actually look at a temperature graph of Margaret River, we actually look reasonably warm, but it's the feels like from that ocean breeze, it's a really big, cold ocean out there. To the south of Margaret River is the Antarctica, and to the west, as you look in this direction, it's thousands and thousands of kilometres before you get to South Africa, and it's a big, cold ocean. And most of our prevailing winds come off that ocean. So in the afternoon, when the sun's shining, because we've got a Mediterranean climate, but when the sun's shining, the fruit's warm, but then that cool breeze cools it off and preserves that beautiful perfume of Cabernet, while the Cabernet is allowed to hang out there and get those gorgeous ripe tannins.
Yeah, and Vasse Felix, so you've been at Vasse Felix for a while. It's a founding winery in that region. What stands out about this winery that drew you to it?
Yeah, so there was an image up before of our estate, which is the estate that Tom Cullity planted here in 1967, and it was all he wanted was 800 mil of gravel loam over clay. And, as Tom alluded to, the Terra Rossa has one type of, one style. But in Margaret River, it's about this ancient old gravel loam that's eroded. We don't have volcanoes or floods. It's a very, very stable, old eroded land with this beautiful, well-drained topsoil. Now, Cabernet can't be in luxurious soil. You don't want to plant it in a riverbed because it's a vigorous beast. But for us, if you have well-drained soil, the plant needs to grow to a beautiful level, but then slow down and focus all its energy on ripening the fruit. So that well-drained soil, they dry out and it just sustains a beautiful small plant with a small amount of fruit that gets that gorgeous concentration, and it just hangs out there for a really long time.
Yeah, and Vasse Felix has, I think, several vineyards dedicated to Cabernet, but the Filius, let's talk a little bit about the name, why it's called Filius, and the idea behind that, and which vineyards it's coming from.
Yeah, so in Margaret River, it's quite a long region. It's about 100 kilometres long, and all of our Cabernet vineyards tend to be in the more northern parts of Margaret River, north of the Margaret River. And I guess the Filius, we call it the son of, and it's the son of our original Cabernet that we've been making since 1972. And there are certain plots that we have in our vineyards that they're more elegant, fine, juicy fruit. It's not in the Premier Cabernet that we talk about has intense concentration. It's more of a rich, full-bodied Cabernet with a lot more tannin concentration. The Filius tends to be a little bit softer, juicy, and it's all about succulence for us. A lot of people think Cabernet, the bigger the better, but certainly in Margaret River in this cool environment, we're all about this beautiful succulence and juiciness. And for me, it's the natural expression of where we're from. Like, wine is purely fruit and yeast, and the fruit and yeast make wine. So we use only the natural yeast from the vineyards, and that's our Filius. All of our Cabernets are made just pure natural fermentation. And we find that what we've got is pure fruit from the land, the yeast from the environment, and this beautiful restraint in the wine, which gives a savoury element, you know. And as Matt was saying, you want to have that savoury, almost umami kind of character that Cabernet allows itself to have, because there's savoury little herbal elements, you know, beautiful. For me, in Margaret River, we smell the forest, the ocean, almost like a nori, you know, dried seaweed sort of character. There's a beautiful, it expresses our environment greater than I think any other variety that we could grow here. And I think Cabernet lends itself to that. But Margaret River environment says there's beautiful, you know, dusty gravel soils. There's that beautiful earthiness. There's the smell of the ocean. There's that beautiful forest, walking through a beautiful dry summer forest. But it's backed up by that beautiful perfumed Cabernet fruit. So I think there's so many elements. For me, Cabernet is the ultimate travel in the bottle. If you want to come to Margaret River, buy a bottle of Cabernet, put your nose in it and smell where we're from. Because I think of any variety, it takes you to Margaret River, and the beautiful elements in our environment. I mean, the coastline's rugged and wild, and the ocean is so fresh, and there's so much forest in this area. It's incredible. So it's the essence of Margaret River, I think.
You're making me desperately want to travel right now, but I do like your thing of all of us being unable to go anywhere. I'm just like, oh my gosh, stop talking about beaches and forests and things like that. I just want to go. But I do like, it is, I think that wine is travel in a bottle of it, and in specific places, and grapes really bring that out. And this certainly does, because as you're speaking, I am getting that as I'm, you know, getting all the aromas out of here. So let's taste the wine. And I feel like you just kind of described all, you know, Margaret River Cabernet in a glass and traveling in a glass, but to specifically, I mean, kind of maybe dive in a little bit deeper on just the Filius and what that represents and how it's kind of made differently from maybe some of the other Cabernet.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the quality of the fruit. I mean, we've got a Tom Cullity, and that comes from, you know, the photo you saw of the original estate. Tom planted those vines. They're now 53 years old, and that is the age of the Margaret River wine region. You know, it's so it has incredible historical sense and a sense of place, and they're very, very rare wines, which is just a very small make of Tom Cullity. And then you've got the Premier, which is the more concentrated parcels, the Filius, which is that easier drinking. I mean, you can see young Cabernet. People used to say you've got to, you know, buy a bottle of Cabernet, you've got to put it in your cellar for 10 years before you drink it. That's not how beautiful Margaret River Cabernet translates. I think it translates as a beautiful young drink, but you've also got it's still going to live in your cellar for 10 years because that's the inherent nature of Cabernet. But we don't push it to a big place. So Filius is probably the wine that's allowed to just express itself in the most natural, elegant form, but it hasn't lost the power of fruit perfume or that beautiful tannin weight that goes so beautifully with food. Beautiful fatty beef, that's what I like, Matt. I think that was a fair call.
Yeah.
So I think it's Filius is definitely a wine that you can drink younger. It's not as intense and grunty as you will find in, our Premier Cabernet, but I find it's one of the most beautiful Cabernets to drink at a younger age.
Yeah, it's very well balanced. There's a brightness to it, which you don't get from fuller-bodied Cabernet sometimes. But there's just something just kind of uplifting and bright about this.
Yeah, and it's not smothering it with too much new oak. Mm-hmm. It's certainly aged in barriques for 15 months. So it'll sit in our barriques and just relax and mellow because Cabernet loves oxygen. It loves to have air during fermentation. The wild yeast loves air. So we allow all of this, a lot of air during the fermentation phase, but then we allow it to relax in barrel for 15 months. and it doesn't lose its freshness over that period of time. It only helps it mellow. And I think that's a sign of the power of Margaret River Cabernet and its stamina to hold that beautiful vibrance, but not be tutti-frutti. You know, I don't think they're tutti-frutti wines. They're still savoury wines, but without being overladen with, you know, oak. It's more of a natural expression of what Margaret River can do. It definitely has all the trademarks of Margaret River Cabernet perfume.
It's just so beautifully balanced. All these wines were beautifully balanced. I did want to touch on kind of as a last or end of the discussion is one question that came through from a lot of people who registered for watching was about climate change, or global warming, if you will. But I kind of wanted to just kind of touch on what might be next, or how you might be feeling that. I guess are you concerned about the impact of climate change on your region right now? And if so, if you're taking any steps to prepare for it, or are you kind of waiting to see what happens? And Virginia, I'm gonna start with you.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, Margaret River's only 50 years old, and we've been planting beautiful varieties that we think suit our climate. And I think, you know, if you think on a viticultural point of view, we're always feeling every season we have to adapt and adjust to slight seasonal variations. We'll never stop doing that. And we'll always be looking at what varieties perform best in our region. And at the moment, and I think, you know, Matt and Tom and ourselves, we're in a marginal Cabernet. We're in cool climate Cabernet zone. And I think our sustainability and longevity in Cabernet has got a long way to go in certainly the Margaret River. And I think we'll keep adapting. You know, we're humans. We're good at adapting. That's why there's so many of us. So we'll keep adapting from a viticultural point of view. But certainly, you know, in the last probably 5 seasons in Margaret River, we've seen some cooler influences rather than warmer influences. So we can't afford to sort of jump the gun and make dramatic changes or change what varieties we might want to play with when we're really just honing in on, you know, Cabernet and Chardonnay and Margaret River is absolutely humming. We're not going to be changing that in a hurry. We just want to keep playing around and just get better at what we're doing.
Yeah, perfect. I know, I think that all of us are kind of, you know, from us in California and just in the US too, of looking at, you know, the fires that happened last year. I think that's why the question kind of came up of what, you know, is something to be looked at. Tom, what about you? Up in Clare Valley, Coonawarra, anything?
Yeah, I think it's probably more of an issue in Clare, to be honest. I'm seeing bigger vintage differences in Clare, you know, earlier vintages, lower yields, you know, less rainfall. So we're, you know, putting down a lot of straw mulch and, you know, more careful with how we irrigate, the timing of our irrigation, and yeah, having to do, you know, a bit of fruit thinning just so the vines get through with less water. So probably playing a bigger difference in Clare. You know, Coonawarra, we're still picking quite late. Haven't really seen, you know, huge effects down there at this stage. You know, we picked again in May this year, and we were worrying if it was going to get ripe. So, you know, for me at the moment, I think Coonawarra is not a bad spot to grow grapes. And
you only have a limited amount of place to necessarily do it, though, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. So Matt, what about you? I mean,
yeah, well, in our region we don't have the moderating effect of the ocean so much, or at all. So we see sort of more random weather events, and that's the one that's sort of we're mindful of. And I think the way Virginia put it, you know, we adapt, we flow with it, and we figure it out. But we're questioning everything from clones and row orientation. We're using new products, natural-based products that are a spray that we have clay in that, you know, works as a sunscreen for the grapes effectively, which we've seen great results from. So there's all sorts of little things. But I think Virginia made the best point, which is, you know, it's an incremental experience. And I think the thing to do when we're working with nature generally is not to react quickly or savagely or dramatically. It's incremental. We've just got to gently move with Mother Nature and find that symbiosis.
Yeah, it's a slow and steady mentality. It's good. Well, thank you all so much for being here, to take the time to share your wines and your stories. We're grateful for those of you at home. If you didn't have a chance to taste these wines, we still have this trio available on Wine.com. Again, it highlights the diversity and value, because this is stellar value. Just tasting these wines again, just to kind of showcase what Australia can do with Cabernet, which is amazing. And in fact, we have a very large selection of Australian wine, and I encourage you to revisit if you have been not drinking enough Australian wine. But Virginia, Tom, and Matt, again, thank you. Really appreciate you being here and taking the time. And stay well and stay safe. Keep making incredible wines.
Cheers. Thanks for having us.
Cheers. Thank you so much, Gwendolyn. Thanks, everybody.
It's both a science and a form of high art. It's made from the combination of grapes, sunlight, rain, soil, and time. It's raised up in the moments that matter. It's wine. And we are Wine.com. We have the largest wine selection in the world, online sommeliers with free advice, and now our powerful new app puts the entire world of wine in your hands. Wine.com. Seriously passionate about wine. Download our free app today.